Yokai Watch and Dragon Quest Monsters. If you just look at them side by side, they seem like two very different games, but upon closer examination, you see a lot more similarities. Both require you to catch multiple familiar and interesting creatures. Both were much more familiar with Japan audiences and much more popular in Japan, and both of them are going to be the subject of today's video. So, good morning, good afternoon, welcome everybody. This is Defeater of Souls, and today we're going to be comparing Yokai Watch to Dragon Quest Monsters to see which one's better. Now, of course, I'm going to be looking at as many facts as I can to prevent this from being unbiased. But I can't prevent that from happening, so please note that there might be some personal bias in this video. But I have played both these games. I've played every game in both of these series that are available in English. So, I do feel like I'm in a position where I can talk about both of these games. So let's start with the main thing that I focus on this channel, Dragon Quest Monsters. Alright, so the start of Dragon Quest Monsters is back in 1998. At this point, Dragon Quest as a series has been going on for quite a while, all the way up to its 6th installment in Dragon Quest VI. Now, Dragon Quest Monsters as a series is mainly released from mobile Nintendo consoles, however, multiple remakes over in Japan have been on other consoles such as the PlayStation and even mobile, just on the phone. Now, of course, the main draw of Dragon Quest Monsters is the fact that you're able to befriend and use all the monsters you acquire in battle. It allows you to try out what it's like to have your favorite slime on your team, or maybe some other obscure monster that nobody else seems to appreciate quite like you. And that's something Dragon Quest Monster excels at really well. Now, of course, all the monsters in Dragon Quest in general were all designed by Akira Toriyama, may he rest in peace, but all of them are also just really cute. Like, it's hard to find an ugly monster, and when you do, you just have to take the time to acknowledge how interesting and unique it is that they were able to get this to work in the way that it ended up working. Now, of course, the plot for Dragon Quest Monsters isn't generally the main drawing point. In every game of it, it has a plot, but the plot's usually not that strong, and if it was taken out of the equation, it would not lessen the enjoyment of these games at all. Most of these games are perfectly fine without a plot. In fact, the very first game practically had no plot, and it was still really good. Now, of course, since it's a spin-off series, Dragon Quest Monsters doesn't have as much going for it as if it was its own dedicated series. However, despite that, it still ended up with its own manga series. I haven't read this, and I've been looking forward to trying to find a way to do so. So, just a fun fact about that. Now, of course, the amount of members you can have in your party varies between each game, but in the first couple of games, it's three. Three monsters visible on the party, and three monsters are battling at the same time. Now, by the time you get to Dark Prince, you can have 4 monsters. In Joker 2 and Joker 3, you have sizes that can affect your party composition, but generally 3 I feel like is a very good amount of monsters that makes up a set of party. Now, Dragon Quest Monsters is part of the Dragon Quest series, and Dragon Quest, if I remember correctly, is the most popular video game franchise in Japan. So, Dragon Quest Monsters is also popular by association. Now, of course, it is still popular everywhere else. Obviously, they're still releasing games here in America, so it's doing well over there. And fun fact, the original Dragon Quest Monsters was actually the very first Dragon Quest game released in Europe. That's a true fact, you can go ahead and look that up. So yeah, it's enjoyed elsewhere and it's seen elsewhere. Now, the actual battle system is kind of important here. Monsters will follow the set tactics you give them. In the first games, it's fairly simple. They can either go all offense, they can go defense, or they can go support with debuffs or buffing attacks. Now, you are able to choose between these designs, these tactics, and as they keep battling using these tactics, it affects their personality, which allows them to choose more and more better actions in order to be better balanced monsters. However, generally, unless you're in the arena, you can also just choose what you want your monsters to do, so that works out too. Monsters, though. Let's talk a bit more about these monsters. How do you gate them? Well, the main way you're getting these monsters is you're befriending them during or after the battle. In the first games, you would throw meat at them and hope that they befriended you. In the Joker games, you'd have to show them your strength in order to get them to like you. Dark Prince combined the two rather well. Now, of course, this is highly random, but if you take a look at basically any creature collector, you're gonna find that a lot of them are just incredibly random, so we're gonna move on from that. Another fun thing about these monsters, though, is that befriending them is not nearly as important as synthesizing them or breeding them. Now, the main draw of these monsters is the fact that you can take any two monsters, put them together, and you're gonna get a stronger monster, with very little exceptions. Now, there might be downfalls to this as it requires you to befriend more and more monsters, but generally it's not too hard to get monsters. And as long as you don't have any specific fusions or specific goals of monsters you want to get, this can be a really good way to build up really strong monsters really quickly. Now, of course, in the newer games, and that by newer games I mean by Joker onwards, these monsters have predetermined ranks. Now, these are ranks that go sometimes as low as F rank, all the way up to S, and sometimes even X rank. X rank's impressive, I don't know why that exists. Anyway, these are generally not just a factor of strength, although they are in some games unfortunately, but are also a factor of rarity. For example, I've said in a different video when I talked about the Mystery Family. Recap, the Mystery Family makes up pretty much bosses and final bosses from main series Dragon Quest games. Those guys are mostly S and X rank because they're all incredibly powerful. And they were final bosses in their respective games, so as a show of respect, they're in a higher rank. But it's just as easy to take a slime and beat the entire game with that, rather than try and get a stronger monster. I know, I've done it before, and other people have done similar things too. That's got nothing to do with anything. Now, besides the monster ranks, how many monsters are in each of these games? Well, it varies. The original game on the Game Boy had 215, and Dark Prince, the newest one, has 526. The most they've ever had at one time was actually in Joker 3, which was Japan exclusive, and that one had about 700. And that's of course if you don't take into account the Japanese exclusive mobile version of the second game, that one has well over 1,000. The main, finally, the main thing that you're doing here is creating these powerful monsters. These monsters aren't meant to work well with others unless you specifically design them. The customizable aspect is the monsters. You will be molding these monsters into whatever you want them to be. Then you'll be putting them with whatever monsters you molded them to be. Basically, it's not about teamwork, but rather having a bunch of incredibly powerful monsters paired together. Now, of course, you could make them work together as a team, but generally that's not the main way you're going to be designing your monsters and teams. And that's the quick overview of Dragon Quest Monsters. Let's take a quick look at Yokai Watch. Yokai Watch first originated back in 2013 when it was first created, and we first saw it here in America in 2015. Now, of course, the few releases we actually saw over here were mostly for the DS and 3DS, but they were mostly on Nintendo consoles as a whole, with there being some games on the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch, and only recently was a game released on the PlayStation 4 down in Japan. The main design of these monsters is not based off of another video game franchise, but rather comical and clever twists on classical Japanese yokai. In fact, you'll likely enjoy these designs of these yokai more and more the more you know about Japanese folklore, so that's something that you have to keep in mind as you're going into this game. Once again, the plot is simple, but it has a bigger impact on the story and does a better job of shaping out gameplay. There's not a game in there where the story doesn't matter as much as the original Dragon Quest monsters. Now, since Yokai Watch is its own series rather than a spin-off series, it's had a much bigger draw of spin-off things that it's created, such as a manga series, an animated TV series, which I did watch, some spin-off games, and even a few movies, some in which I did watch. I have been into Yokai Watch before. I did it a lot as a child. I had the medallion with all the medals, but that's hardly the point. The average party size for your team in a standard game of Yokai Watch is 6. In the first 2 games, you would have them on a wheel. On the 3rd game, there's some kind of grid system, but I honestly didn't do enough research to try and figure that out. So basically, you'd have a wheel where you'd have 3 visible yokai at any given time that'd be doing their things, and you'd have 3 more in the back that you could switch to by turning the wheel in either direction. This is pretty interesting, and it offers a lot of depth into the gameplay of this game. Unfortunately, despite this, Level 5, the creators of Yokai Watch, considered it unsuccessful in North America, which is probably why I haven't seen any of their games recently. However, in Japan and Europe, they've been doing really well. The Japanese audience loves it probably because they know a lot about yokai, and the Europeans love it because they're not Americans and they don't care about stupid things. So good for the Europeans. Yokai also control themselves, similar to how the monsters do in Dragon Quest Monsters. These yokai have their own sets of skills, abilities, special moves, and they are fully autonomous. You do not do anything to control them except for two situations. The first is if they fill up a special bar called the Sultimate. This allows you to use a special move. This special move can be a powerful attack, or maybe it's a powerful support move, like some of the best ones are. The other way you can help them is if they get possessed, because yokais are ghosts and other demons in Japanese folklore, so when they can possess your allies and you can possess them in order to create all sorts of negative effects. In order to take care of this, you have to move them back to the back of the wheel in order to cure these monsters, and it can create some interesting scenarios, especially with some of the boss fights in the game. Now, the main way you're going to befriend these yokais is either by feeding them food in battle, similar to Dragon Quest monsters, but the main way you're going to be getting these guys is through the Crank-a-kai. The Crank-a-kai is a literal gacha machine where you're going to be putting in tokens and hoping that you're going to be getting good yokai out of it. Now, of course, this is a highly volatile system. I've done it before where I was able to get 5 S ranks with 5 coins, and I've done it before where I've used 10 coins and didn't get anything at all. Now, of course, as when I talk about ranks, ranks also exist in these games, similar to how they did in some of the newer Dragon Quest Monsters games. And these are also, once again, more of indication of rarity than actual skill. Now, they hold a little bit more sway. For example, your legendary yokai are definitely going to be more powerful than your rank D yokai, but you can make it work, and with good team design, you don't even have to worry about that. And when I say team design, I do mean team design. Unlike Dragon Quest Monsters, team building is your main focus here when you're creating these teams for your playthrough. The main way you're going to be setting them up is trying to figure out what you have and what they do, and figure out the best way to pair them. Each yokai has a tribe, so when you pair tribes together and put them together on the wheel, they'll get a bonus that's different for each tribe. Using these tribes to your advantage is an essential part of creating a successful team in Yokai Watch playthroughs. Once again, I'm not exactly sure how that works in Yokai Watch 3. But how many yokai are there? That's a good question. In the original game, there is 223 befriendable yokai. Since there's a lot more detail, you can almost excuse it for having less monsters than the first game of Dragon Quest Monsters. It's actually more. But at the same time, Dragon Quest Monsters Joker only had 210 monsters, and that game's selection of monsters sucked, so Yokai Watch 1 did better than that. Now, my personal favorite in the Yokai Watch series, Yokai Watch 2, has also got a great variety of games. Around 450 yokai that you can befriend through various means. If you compare that to another DS game for Dragon Quest Monsters, Joker 2 only had like 311 at this time. And then finally, if you take the third game, there's about 698, which is just about the same amount that Joker 3 had. Now, the similarities between Joker 3 and Yokai Watch 3 is the fact that nobody in America probably has too many copies of any of these, but that's fine. Now, of course, one main thing to notice about Yokai Watch that's not really applicable for Dragon Quest Monsters, or at least not the original versions, is palette swaps. Yokai Watch likes palette swaps, and they use it quite well. Now, it's not a problem. I have no problems with palette swaps, despite my last video being a ranking of Dragon Quest games on account of that. On contrary, palette swaps, if done right, can be very good. Now, but when you have over 100 different types of Chibanyan, then it starts getting a bit terrifying. Because if you think about it, say all 100 of these Chibanyan are in Yokai Watch 3. This probably isn't true, but we'll pretend it is for this calculation. That means 1/7 of this game's monsters is just different versions of a cat. So if you're afraid of cats, you're not going to like Yokai Watch. That's a joke. So that's pretty much all the stats that Yokai Watch has going. So now that we've seen both of these games' stats, which one is the better game? The better game is a matter of opinion. That's right, I'm not actually going to answer this question because, once again, I'm incredibly biased. My entire YouTube channel is based around Dragon Quest Monsters. Of course, I'm going to say Dragon Quest Monsters is my personal favorite, but it doesn't necessarily make it a better game than Yokai Watch. Both of them are perfect examples of a fun game where you can collect creatures inspired off of different things and have a good time. If you're looking to have a time where you have to build good teams in order to move past puzzling scenarios, Yokai Watch is a great choice. If you're looking for something where you can create one monster and create the almighty deity of monsters, Dragon Quest Monsters is probably the better game for you. But you could have a great time playing either games. In fact, you'll probably have a great time playing both games. That's why I'm not going to actually claim definitively that either of these games are better, which meant that my thumbnail is probably lying, but I don't care. Either way, I would recommend either of these games, if you can find them. Now, of course, the early versions of Dragon Quest Monsters are Game Boy games, Game Boy Color games, Game Boy Advance games. Those ones are easy for emulation and that sort of nonsense. If you're looking for Yokai Watch, DS emulation is a thing, but it's a little sketchy at times, so do that at your own will. It'll be much easier to try and find physical copies, though, especially since the likes of Yokai Watch 2 and 3 are both 3DS exclusive, and finding a Yokai Watch 3 physical copy is gonna cost you a lot of money. Now, of course, that doesn't mean it's a bad game, and back when the 3DS Nintendo DS shop was open, you could probably get it there for a reasonable price, but if you're willing to mod your 3DS, you could probably find a way to get it if you can't afford the $400 price tag that's currently on it. Now, of course, in the end, it doesn't really matter what I say because I'm not getting enough views for my opinion here on the internet to actually impact anything. So I'll just say, play both games. If you're here because you like Dragon Quest Monsters, give Yokai Watch a shot. If you're here because you saw Yokai Watch in the title and it's like, what's this Dragon Quest Monsters crap? Give Dragon Quest Monsters a shot. If you don't actually care about any of this but decided to watch my video anyway, thanks! And play both those games, give them both a shot. And that's all I have to say. So, with that undefinitive answer, this has been Defeater of Souls. Feel free to like and subscribe to my channel for more Dragon Quest Monsters related content. If you like this comparison video, there's still quite a few popular creature collectors that I do have my eye on for comparing, and I'll be happy to hear whether or not you want one of those in the near future. That's pretty much all I have to say, so thank you, and this has been Defeater of Souls.